Way back in like 2018 or something, Digital Extremes added this guitar into Warframe, and now here in 2025 they said, you know what, one guitar and the little pack that you can buy different skins for this guitar, that's not enough. We need to add another guitar into Warframe. Enter Temple. Temple has an exalted guitar. We can literally whip out a guitar that is a flamethrower, and we can burn the enemies to death with a guitar flamethrower that can even talk if you're using the Gemini skin. And today, I'm going to be showing you guys not one, but actually 5 different builds for Temple. So if you want a me in Temple, or if you just want to know everything about this Warframe, this is definitely the video for you. So first things first, we actually have to talk about Temple's abilities. We'll cover their passive first. So play abilities in sync with the backbeat metronome to invigorate ability effects while increasing ability efficiency by 50%. Now, if you don't know what that means, if we come out of the arsenal, you can see that under your crosshair, you've got this little annoying thing that's going back and forth and back and forth. Now, if we happen to cast an ability when the little pointer is in the middle, we're going to have 50% bonus efficiency, and the ability is actually going to be amplified. So whatever it does, it's going to do more of. Now, as we keep on casting abilities when the little pointer is in the middle, that actually builds up our fuel for our 4th ability, which is our exalted guitar flamethrower. So if I go ahead and cast my 1, you see that bar fills up, and you can eventually get it all the way to full, cast your guitar, and then if I hold down left click, that little bar is going to drain. The rest of Temple's abilities work as normal. So the 1 is just a cast, it's fire damage coming up from the ground. The 2 is a crit chance bonus on enemies that are affected by the 2, and the 3 is like a shield gate, and it makes you invulnerable for a short duration. So it's basically like a get out of jail free card. Another thing to mention about the 3rd ability is it also gives you more heat damage. Now, this is very important to note, because if, let's say, for example, you wanted to put Roar onto Temple, you would be locked into swapping off the 3rd ability, Ripper's Wheel, for Roar. So if you go ahead and you take a look at my Roar build here, I've got to have Roar on this ability slot, otherwise I wouldn't be able to put it on. So that is just something the DE does sometimes. They just don't let us pair like a damage buffing ability with another damage buffing ability, because they're like, yo, you know, the players are going to be dealing too much damage. They're going to break the game on a very consistent basis if we allow them to do this much damage. So they just, you know, twin it back to say you can't pair this with that, and that's just how it is. But this is the build, and if we go ahead and we take a look through all of the builds that I've got going, pay attention to the left hand side of the screen where all the ability stats are, and what you're going to notice is that the numbers for, you know, strength, range, efficiency, and duration, they don't really change that much, especially with these first 3 builds. On the Breach Surge build and the Ensnare build, there's slight variation where we take a little bit from our ability strength and we throw it into our range, but that is basically the only variation. You want to have a lot of ability strength on this Warframe. You want to have a little bit of range, not too much, not too little, and just a tiny bit of duration. So once you've thrown a build together, your gameplay loop is going to look a little bit like this. So first of all, we cast our 3, and then we can go ahead and we can cast our 2. Make sure to, you know, have as many enemies in front of you as possible, because it's a cone ability, right? So you could see sort of the area of effect there. Then you can go ahead and you can cast your 1 with the timing of the tempo. Make sure to always cast an ability whenever that little pointer is in the middle, so you get the amplified effects. Then we can go ahead and we can cast Lizzie. So this is our exalted guitar, and what you can do is you can aim down sights and you can see that your abilities actually change. We have viral on the 1, magnetic on the 2, we've got cold on the 3, and corrosive on the 4. Now, if we wait before we press one of these abilities for the little pointer to be in the middle, it's actually not going to cost any of that fuel, so I can just keep on going ahead and applying viral or magnetic or whatever to the enemies without any of the fuel being drained, and then I can, you know, flamethrower to my heart's content, basically, right? So really fun gameplay loop, and this weapon is really good. I'll go ahead and I'll show you guys the actual build for Lizzie right now. So this is the build that I'm rocking on Lizzie, and the first thing that you're probably going to notice is you're going to be like, Flynn, what the heck, there isn't any additional elements on this build. And that's simply because I wanted to lean into the whole fact that we're dealing a lot of heat damage. So this is basically just a build that is going to bump up that heat damage number as much as we possibly can, while also giving us a little bit of quality of life via file acceleration for the fire rate and sinister reach to extend the length of the beam. I tried things out, like let's say for example shred. I didn't feel like it had any meaningful effect on how much damage I was dealing across like a wide group of enemies, so I just decided to keep it off, have file acceleration on to compensate for that, you know, negative to fire rate from crit delay. And this is basically the most amount of damage that we're going to be getting out of Lizzie. Now, something that might confuse you is this primary frostbite Archon. If you don't have this, you can swap it out for Merciless. I don't recommend Deadhead for the simple fact that it's pretty hard to get headshots with Lizzie, so just definitely run Merciless if you don't have Frostbite. But the reason that we're running Frostbite is because we're going to be using the Epitaph Prime as a primer to get a lot of damage out of Galvanized Aptitude here. So the build that you run on your Epitaph Prime is actually the most important part of this entire setup that we're rocking with Temple here. So this is what we call a heat inherit primer build, where we have viral and we also have heat, but we've weighted towards heat. You can see that heat is the damage type that is basically the most on this build. So that's because we have Scorch and also Prime Heated Charge. This basically means that we're going to be applying heat procs to the enemies more often than, let's say, viral / whatever. Now, it's important that we absolutely use the Epitaph Prime if we're going to be using that Archon on Lizzie, so primary frostbite. And then the other thing that I want to draw your attention to is the Archon that I'm actually using on the Epitaph Prime, which is secondary fortifier. Now, because you're going to be priming enemies with this build, I thought might as well throw this on for defense, because it gives you up to 15,000 overguard whenever you're fighting Xmas enemies. There is a lot of Xmas enemies in the game now, so if you're paying attention, you're playing the game, you're focused, you're dialed in, you're always going to have overguard, and you're always going to be dealing maximum damage with this setup. And that just allows for a little bit more flexibility whenever it comes to actually throwing mods onto the Temple Warframe, because we don't have to waste a mod on, let's say, Rolling Guard, for example. Overguard also makes you knockdown immune, so we don't have to run Prime Sure-Footed. Sorry, Nightmare Frame. And yeah, so that just lets us throw more ability strength on to the build. Now, something that might confuse you with the Epitaph Prime build is the fact that we are running a Primed Expel mod. Now, this is going to amplify the damage that you deal with basically all of your heat procs by quite a bit. That's why it's called a heat inherit build. So what I need you guys to think about is the fact that we've got Scorch on, Prime Heated Charge on, and Primed Expel Grenier. These are basically all sources of damage. And what happens is whenever we apply a heat proc using the Epitaph Prime, the bonuses from Prime Heated Charge, Scorch, and this Expel mod are within that heat proc. So any additional heat procs that we apply with Temple's abilities, be that Lizzie or the One, that is then going to have the bonus from the Expel Grenier mod, the Scorch, and the Prime Heated Charge applied to those additional heat procs. So you're going to be dealing even more damage with all the heat procs that you're applying with the abilities, even though we don't have, you know, primed Expel mods for your Warframe or for Lizzie. Now, you can go ahead and throw on a beam mod onto Lizzie if you want to, but there's no real reason to do so if you're already inheriting that effect from the secondary weapon. And I mean, you're going to be using the primer anyway because we're rocking Galvanized Aptitude, and it just allows us to run just a different source of damage, right? If you think about a prime beam mod as a multiplicative buff, then you know, running something that is additive and then the multiplicative at the end is going to make for a larger amount of total damage output at the end of the big long math equation that happens within Warframe. So to show you guys this entire build in action, the first thing that you want to do is go ahead and cast your third ability for that extra heat damage. Now you want to go ahead and start priming the enemies, and you can see that they've got a bunch of heat procs on them. And if we pause the game, we can actually see that we have that primary frostbite Archon that's applied on our Lizzie. It's activated, so you just keep on using your Epitaph to activate that, because it's got that built-in pull proc on it. And then what you want to do, you want to go ahead and you cast your 2, and that's going to make these enemies be more vulnerable to crits. So you're going to deal, you know, better crits. You can see that we're orange critting just here with the Epitaph. You can go ahead and cast your 1, and as you can see, the 1 is actually dealing amplified damage now, simply because we are priming these enemies with the Epitaph Prime Heat Inherit Primer. Another cool thing is if you go ahead and you hit the 2 whenever your free is active and you land it in the middle, it actually extends the duration of your free. So you can see the duration timer going up and up and up there. So that's your heat damage buff, right? So prime, cast your 2, cast your 1 a few times, then get some energy. I need some energy. Pull out your Lizzie, and now you can, you know, 1, 2, 3, whatever. You can see that we're red critting, and the bad guys die basically in no time. So with Lizzie in hand, we prime them, we make them more vulnerable to crits, cast our Lizzie, 1, 2, 3, 4, aiming down sights, and we can just hold left click. Look at all the red crits, and all the bad guys die, and we're not even at our max augmented stacks because we're running that for more ability strength. And on top of that, we're also getting more ability strength and efficiency from Arcane Impetus, which is another Arcane that we've got equipped on to Temple. And that is basically all of Temple's base kit. Super solid Warframe in my honest opinion. Like, you deal a lot of heat procs, you can deal a lot of damage with the heat procs using some type of heat inherit. You've got awesome survivability on the free, and you guys could see Lizzie just absolutely shredding, especially whenever you take the crit buff from the 2 into consideration. The other thing that I want to guide you guys towards is the Tau Forge shards that I'm using. So I'm using 2 yellow and 3 of the red ones. The red is all ability strength, and the yellow is the casting speed. That really helps with the third ability cast time. If you guys pick up Temple yourself and you cast a free, you'll be like, bro, I am standing in place for so long. The casting speed helps out so much. But now we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the second build, which is the Nourish build, where we go ahead and we replace the Lizzie guitar. So this build is extremely similar to the last build, except the difference is we are running Combat Discipline, and we swapped off Arcane Impetus for Arcane Avenger. And this is basically just whenever we take damage, which we're going to be taking a lot of damage because of Combat Discipline here, we are going to get more crit chance. And that's nice because this is basically a weapon platform build. So we're using Nourish for that added viral damage, and we're also using Ripper's Wheel for that added heat damage. What this allows us to do is it allows us to use a weapon that really likes Galvanized Aptitude. Now, there are some weapons in Warframe where a mod like Galvanized Aptitude, which we call Gun Condition Overload, it works better on some weapons compared to others. On the Stulta here, it has a thing called Multiplicative Gun CO. So basically, because of DE coding logic, Galvanized Aptitude is for some reason 10 times better on the Stulta compared to your average weapon, like let's say the Bratton, for example, right? So this is the build that I went ahead and threw together for the Stulta, and what you're going to see is we deal insanely big damage numbers with the primary fire and also the alt fire. Now, something important to note, I'm running primary acuity, so we want to be aiming for the head, which you should be aiming for the head anyway in Warframe if you want maximum damage output. But that also means we can't run multi-shot on this build, so that's why multi-shot isn't on here, because primary acuity simply just doesn't allow for that. And yeah, it's a pretty straightforward build. We're running viral, we got Serration on, primary deadhead for bonus weak spot damage, all that good stuff, some crit. It's a really solid build, and you're about to see why. So with this version of the build, what you want to do is you want to go ahead and cast your Nourish, then cast your free. You want to go and cast your 2, making sure you hit as many enemies as possible. Prime the enemies with your Heat Inherit Primer or regular primer, it doesn't really matter for this build. And then you can use your 1 to spread some heat procs. Now, if you headshot the enemies, what you're going to see is you're going to deal some very large damage numbers. You're also going to damage yourself, which is going to proc those widespread viral procs. And yeah, you're just going to deal a ton of damage to all the enemies. If we do the middle mouse button, you can see even bigger damage numbers. If we prime, keep our abilities up, all that good stuff, you'll see huge damage numbers. So there's 53 million, you know, quite casual. And again, that's 36 million. So yeah, weapon platform, Temple, really solid, especially good on weapons that make use of Galvanized Aptitude. Now, if you don't want to, you don't have to replace Lizzie with Nourish. You can go ahead and replace the 1. That's also an option. I just wanted to replace the 4 because I thought the 1 was really fun for spreading more heat and all that there good stuff. So that's why I went ahead and did that. But moving on, now we're going to try out the Roar build, and on this build we went back to using Arcane Impetus and also Growing Power. Now the reason that we swapped back to Arcane Impetus is because we get that bonus to our ability strength and efficiency if we happen to use Lizzie, because Lizzie has those alt damage types on whenever we aim down sights and cast abilities, right? So that allows us to build up our impetus for more ability strength to buff up our roar percentage. You just got to remember, like I said at the beginning of the video, we're forced into removing Temple's third ability because we're running Roar. Unfortunately, we can't run them together, but Roar is that good of an ability, and you're going to see that whenever I demonstrate this build, that Roar just amplifies your damage by so much. It's not even funny, and it wouldn't be fair if you got to keep the other heat damage buffing ability on the frame, because we already deal so much more damage, right? So you just got to make sure that you've also got that heat inherit build on your Epitaph. And yeah, let's just go ahead, jump in, do a little demonstration. So we jump in here, cast our Roar, make sure to get the timing right as well for that extra efficiency. We can cast our 2, and then if we prime with our Epitaph, so let's shoot like 2 shots and we use our 1, you can see that we deal way more amplified damage. We can use the 1 again, even more amplified damage. So I'm not even really able to whip out Lizzie to show you guys, because these enemies are actually like so weak whenever we've got Roar, the heat inherit primer, and the 1 all working together to, you know, deal those heat procs. So this time we're going to use Roar, we're going to use the 2, we're going to use Epitaph primer, we're going to use our Lizzie, ADS, 3, 4, and then we're just going to left click, and you can see that the enemies just burn to death as well. Now this is going to scale really well into like a Void Cascade, for example. So really awesome build to just bring into a Void Cascade if you want to play Temple and you want to watch the world burn. Next up, we're running the Breach Surge build. So what you'll notice on this build is I'm running a little bit more range. So I've swapped Power Drift for Cunning Drift in that Exo slot there, and this just allows me to reach more enemies with a single cast of Breach Surge. I didn't want to go overboard with the range because I could definitely throw on, let's say for example, Augur Reach, or I could throw on Overextended, but the thing with Overextended is you get negatives to your ability strength, so the 2 and the 3, they're going to be held back, and while I think that would definitely be okay, I just kind of wanted to go balls to the wall with the crit bonus and the heat bonus and all that good stuff, and just see like really how crazy I could make this frame, right? So we're running Arcane Avenger because I am going to be using, you know, just basic weapons, the Stulta on this build, and I want a little bit more crit. Growing Power is still there for the extra ability strength as well, but we've put Breach Surge over the 4 because what I wanted to see is I wanted to see Breach Surge interacting with the 1. Now again, this is a flexible build. You could take Breach Surge and you can put it over the 1 and keep Lizzie and run with that if you really wanted to. This is just what I preferred whenever I was, you know, playing around with the frame. And I also thought to myself, like, I've got other builds where I'm still using the Exalted Guitar, right? So I'm trying to hit like a fine balance of, you know, builds with just the first 3 abilities and builds with the Exalted Guitar, right? So same idea. Cast your 3, cast your 2, now you cast your Breach Surge. Now you want to prime the enemies and just spam your 1, and you'll see the little Breach Surge balls bounce between the enemies and deal a lot of damage that way. So it's really good for killing a big crowd of enemies with your Heat Inherit primer and also, you know, your first ability. And now last but definitely not least, we've got an Ensnare build, and this time I did actually take off the Umbral Intensify to throw on Augur Reach, because this is a build about gripping enemies up and basically just shredding them down with a very unique build on Lizzie. So if we go back to Lizzie, we go to my config B here, you can see that I'm running gas damage, right? And you might be like, whoa, a gas damage? Yeah, so we're still using our Epitaph Prime as a primer because we're still rocking the primary Frostbite, so that is going to amplify our damage quite a bit. But the idea here is basically the exact same. We go in, we cast our free, we get that bonus heat damage. We can cast our 2 for the bonus crit. We grip them up with ensnare, we prime them, we whip out our Lizzie, and then we just hold down left click after we've maybe primed them with the aiming down sights, and we deal a bunch of gas damage. We leave behind these gas clouds, and the enemies just drop dead. So in practice, our build looks a little bit like this. We can go ahead, we can use ensnare to begin with. We can cast our free, then we can cast our 2 like so. Whip out our Lizzie, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we gas, and it leaves behind this gas cloud that is going to be damaging the enemies. So if we spawn in some more enemies like so, you can see that damage over time. It sort of lingers there, and yeah, it just deals a ton of damage. So you think about the smaller enemies, they're going to be walking into that gas cloud, and they're just going to be dropping dead, right? Especially if you have a way to, you know, apply your viral and stuff like that. And the thing is, we didn't even prime them. If we prime them as well, we're going to be dealing even more damage because of the heat inherit and the expel, remember? So cast your 2, we whip out our Lizzie, and there you go. Like, they die even quicker. We spawn in that gas cloud again, and you can see the damage over time just ticking down at the enemy's health. So very good, very nice. Another cool thing, we can actually change from gas to blast if you want to run some blast damage. So all I've been doing to do that is swapping out my Malignant Force for Rime Rounds. And it's basically the exact same thing. You just go ahead, grip up the enemies like so. I need a little bit of energy here, so got to get that first. I'll cast my free. I missed my timing there, no big deal. Cast my 2, and then I can prime these guys a little bit. Whip out my Lizzie, and then you can see the blast just makes them go boom, and they all drop dead. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The only other thing that I'd maybe recommend changing from this build is this a Mars Hatred. Like, that's just a placeholder mod. I threw that in there because I was like, oh, more ability strength, and I'm already getting Overguard from my Epitaph. You could potentially consider running Rolling Guard in this slot. It's like a flex slot, to be honest. You know, I find that as long as you have basically, you know, your Blind Rage, your Equilibrium, Stretch, Transient, Prime Flow, Prime Continuity, your Archon Vitality whenever you're using the 1 and the 4, this final slot here, it's basically a flex slot. You don't have to have the bonus ability strength if you don't want it. You can have the bonus ability duration or range. But one thing to keep in mind is that your Ripper's Wheel is actually capped at 60 seconds max duration. It doesn't matter how much duration you throw on. So if we go over to this config over here, and I just throw on every single duration mod under the sun. So we have our Prime Continuity, we'll have our Constitution, we'll have our Augur Message, which looks like that. And then we have, let's say, Narrow-Minded, right? We hover over, you can see that it's still capped at 60 seconds. It just starts at 60 seconds. So you can't make that max duration any higher. That's why it's called max duration. So over investing into your duration stat isn't that worth it, especially because you can, you know, build up more duration with Overdrive by, you know, getting the timing right and casting it. So that's basically it. Temple, I don't know, man. Like, I think they really nailed it. They nailed the design. They nailed the abilities. Super fun. You know, I see myself taking this into a Void Cascade. I see myself enjoying playing this Warframe. So I would say, you know, a minimum B tier, but I would put Temple into A tier personally. So, yeah, big fan of Temple. Really good release. Really enjoyed them, or really enjoyed them because they're a day them. My bad. Correcting myself in the video just so no commenters get mad. Thanks for watching the video. Like it if you liked it. Subscribe for more Warframe content. I'll see you guys in the next one.